Speaking of missing, I missed our next guest, and I'm not just saying that because he's sitting here. But from Fox Sports and The Athletic with a great article out today. Good to see you, Bruce Feldman. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
You're fresh back from Las Vegas, Nevada?
I am, yeah. It was like a balmy 119 degrees there.
The Big 12 is having their media day in Las Vegas, Nevada. What's going on in our college football world?
Hey, they're kind of, the last couple of years, it either been in AT&T Stadium or the Star, Jerry Jones Properties.
Right. Well, that makes sense. But Texas, right? The state of Texas.
But think about this now. Yeah. You got Arizona, Utah, Colorado. So you add 4 schools from, obviously ASU too. So you add them from the Pac-12 or what was the Pac-12, and let's move a little closer to the West Coast. So they did it in Vegas.
Well, you're an East Coast guy, right? Growing up,
I am.
Okay,
but
correct.
I don't mind the 40-minute flight.
No, I know that too. But the reason why I'm saying that is I kind of feel like we're beginning a new world where folks like you and I, who grew up on the East Coast, talking about how you're a Met Jet fan because they played in Shea Stadium together, right? Or you're a Yankee Giant fan because they played in Yankee Stadium together. And you're dating yourself when you say that sort of thing. That the comments of, man, the Big 12 is in Nevada and the Big 10 is in Los Angeles, we're going to wind up dating ourselves, saying, I remember when. This is it. Like we are living in the watershed moment of collegiate athletics writ large and football right now.
Right. And I think there's the majority of fans do not remember the old Southwestern Conference. They do not remember
the SWAC.
Well, that was the Southwestern. Yeah, the SWAC was, one of the HBCU conferences. That one, which was the one that obviously had all the Texas schools and was like infamous for the SMU cheating and all of that.
Yes.
That was a long time ago. But even the Big 8 was a long time ago. Then it became the Big 12, and I sometimes catch myself and I'll say the Pac-10 when I mean the Pac-12 because it changed. Speaking of the Northeast, like you and I remember when Penn State wasn't in the Big 10.
They were independent like Notre Dame.
Well, yeah. And they were independent like Miami was. And before the Big East, I have like great special feeling for Big East basketball, right? Because we're of that era of the 80s of Louis and Boeheim and John Thompson. But, then the Big East was football. But then that went away and people adjust. I think this will be a little harder for a lot of folks who are, at the end of, so you're talking about the media days. So it was Big 12 was there, and then the Mountain West was there. And then there was, at the end of it, there was like a cocktail party for the 2 remaining schools of what was the Pac-12. That's Oregon State and Washington State.
What do you mean? There was a cocktail party for?
There was an event. The mascots were there. Some of the players were there. I mean, look, Washington State, as much turnover as they've had to deal with for all sorts of reasons, they beat Wisconsin the last 2 years, and Oregon State had some really good teams under Jonathan Smith in recent years, but they got left behind, and now they're playing some hybrid schedule of, their old teams and the teams that they're probably lumped in with. But that's, they're the saddest part of this, I feel like, because.
Did you go to this affair?
I did. I popped in there before I left.
Was there a cash bar?
It was not a cash bar. The food was good. Everything was set up. They treated it well. Merton Hanks, who I'm sure you know well.
Of course.
Merton was a long time, the guy behind football in the conference, and he's still connected to it. And so you see a lot of familiar faces. And I think the product will, those 2 schools, they still have good coaches. They still have some good players. But it's just, I don't think they're going to completely fall off the radar because you have to keep in mind, you have Stanford and Cal, along with SMU, who are now in the ACC, which the Stanford and Cal piece feels like the most random of this. But who knows how stable the ACC is. And so could there be another swing of conference realignment? I suspect there will be.
I don't know why I'm so fascinated by the fact that
you would have liked to be at that cocktail party.
You damn straight I would have. Yeah. Washington State, Oregon State.
The mascots.
Getting to get what were the mascots doing? The tray pass for the food? Like
the mascots, I think, had the sunglasses on. It was a kind of cool look for them.
And it was in just an establishment in Las Vegas?
It was like, how in the in the Bellagio, there is the Spago. Well,
Yes.
on the other side, I feel like I'm name dropping big here. On
It's
the other
okay.
side was
It's Vegas, man.
big suites, and it was a nice setup. You know, it was like, I give them credit for leveraging the people who were there, and I thought it was good. I think they're going to do the best they can. You know,
What are they going to do? Just
they're going to try to keep playing. I mean, they're going to get money from somehow how this is all cycled out. But I would use this example. So last year, again, Washington State, they start out pretty hot and really good quarterback they had at the time, who's now transferred more money to go to Miami. But last year they got off to a fast start. Then they go on, have a bye week. And in the bye week, from talking to coaches who'd been there, they just said it was almost like the players kind of everything hit them of all the transition that they were going through, that they were no longer going to be there was no longer a Pac-12. It was like while the games were being played and while they were in the middle of it, but that like bye week there was a hiccup, and from that point on it just felt like their season unspooled.
So what you mentioned moments ago that you think there's more expansion coming. Like what?
I think there's more turnover because
what do you think?
The ACC just does not feel stable at all. You have all this saber rattling between Florida State, Clemson. You have other commodities, but whether it's North Carolina, Virginia, Miami. I mean, we'll see how it plays out, but it just feels like it's a weird situation right now. Does that mean the SEC is going to want any of those teams? Does that mean the Big Ten is going to want any of those teams? I suspect the Big 12 would love a couple of those teams because they're bigger brands than anything they have right now.
Which teams? Florida State, right?
I don't know how Florida State would love the move to the Big 12, but I think they would love the other two power conferences. If it's Florida State, if it's Clemson, if it's Miami, if it's North Carolina, I mean, those are all bigger brands. Now, some of those schools haven't had the success that, let's say, Utah has over the last decade in football. I mean, Miami's run, we know all the legendary football players who came through and 5 national titles, but in 20 years to this point, they've had, one really good season. Oklahoma State's had a bunch more than that. A bunch of these other schools in the Big 12 have, and so we'll see. I mean, this could be a big year, I think, for Miami, but we'll see. We've heard that before.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of that stuff with you in a bit. Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. And again, you mentioned Florida State might not like the Big 12, but in terms of what you and I do for a living, could you imagine Deion Sanders coaching Colorado into Florida State? It's a conference game. I mean,
oh, man.
What would that be?
There would be a lot of people in the Big 12 who would love that.
Big time. I mean, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. So there was 2 days, the first day and then the second day of the Big 12, and the star power showed up the second day because we know who came in,
That's
right?
prime time.
Yeah, there's something. We'll see. They got to go from 4 wins to at least probably 8, I feel like, for it to feel like, okay, this is backing up what we're expecting, or some of us are expecting.
But what was the general sense of Deion's conversation? We saw a soundbite that he mentioned how his wins are measured differently, and I'm sure that landed in certain parts of the Big 12 landscape potentially as like, okay, you won 4 games last year. I just know how Deion is where he's coming from. I don't disagree with him that his wins are actually measured differently.
Because everything is different, right? Like I work for Fox Sports, and the first month of the season, we got insane ratings numbers. And so did ESPN when
so did this show. Anytime we talked about him, I'm not kidding.
and also when we wrote about him or anything kind of connected to him, not always, but sometimes, the response was very strong, and people are like, well, why? They're sick of the coverage. Well, somebody's not, because they're tuning in to watch, right? And look, in the first few games, almost nobody outside of probably, a handful of people in Boulder expected them to beat TCU at TCU last year. They did. Now, after that, they beat Nebraska, they beat Colorado State, and then it got sideways from them. But look, they weren't really good in the trenches. They were really bad in the trenches, to be honest. And that came back to bite them. They had a bunch of close games that they lost, which was a big difference from the year before when they got blown out of almost every game in a big way. But again, it's wins and losses, and I think, it's interesting because like one of the coaches I know in the conference who I talked to Thursday morning or Wednesday morning, and he was like, you know, Deion's been good in our meetings, but but I think they also, most of them at least acknowledge this, if not all, that this is good for their business. You know, they would much rather have people talking about them than, you know, what was going on across town in Vegas with, you know, if you're in the Mountain West, where it's just, you know, maybe there's some good football there, but it's just not getting people's attention.
Right.
You know, whereas love him or hate him, you probably have an opinion on Deion Sanders.
Well, Deion was, again, I love what you're hearing. Like, people are like, he's great. You know, he's great in the meetings. That was the same way when he first showed up on NFL Network. It's just like, well, Deion is all going to be about himself, maybe. People were saying that in our own world. Then he showed up and he's like, he's the greatest teammate you can possibly have. He totally understands about business. He totally understands what makes something work. He totally understands what he brings to that equation and how he can leverage that for his own business. I mean, honestly, that doesn't surprise me. The question is, as you said, it's got to go from 4 to 8. What do you think in terms of wins?
I think they can do that. I mean, because I think they've look, it's hard. It would be hard not to get better considering how bad they were on the offensive line last year to be there. But from everything I've heard from the people I talked to in there, I think they have upgraded those areas in part. Now, the schedule to me, even though, you know, you would think, okay, the Pac-12, as it had, you know, a national title contender team and a bunch of really good quarterbacks in it, their schedule feels harder this year than it was last year. If you look, there's like even their opener, they play an FCS school, but it's North Dakota State.
Yeah, he was joking about that too. Like, yeah, good luck.
Yeah,
like,
thanks, Rick. Rick George, you did me no favors.
That's right.
Because they win that game. It's like, yeah, you beat an FCS school, you lose it, and it's like, oh my God, that's who you lost to.
Well, it kind of sounds like Michigan versus Appalachian State. You can't win, you can't lose. You can't win for losing.
Yeah, and then look, they play Nebraska. I think the next week, I think Nebraska's going to be much improved, year or two under Matt Rule. And then all of a sudden, you face a pretty steady diet of good teams. But that's what you want. I mean, I think if they can protect Shedeur better, much better than they did last year, they have really good skill guys. You know, I talked to Shedeur for a little while a couple of days ago, and he was very high on the upgrades they had in the offensive line room and what they brought in. And I suspect they will win a bunch of games late because they do have playmakers. And I do think he's a terrific quarterback. So as long as he's healthy and as long as he's not under just total duress all the time, I think they'll get to 8 wins. I don't know if they can do more than that. I mean, who knows? You know, confidence is a crazy thing, right? Once you get on a roll, you know, who knows where it goes. I mean, I don't think there's any team, like we talked about this on the Audible Hour podcast a couple days ago. I think there's 11 teams in the Big 12 that can legitimately win that conference. That's how wide open it is, because there's no Ohio State in there. There's no Georgia.
No Texas.
No Texas. You know, there's nothing close to it, right? You know, in terms of like a roster that's that stocked. I mean, there's really good teams, but I don't know if there's anything close to a great team.
Yeah. And what about Prime's statement that he thinks that Colorado could have the first and second overall picks of next year's NFL draft? Did you hear that one?
I don't know if that one I might have missed. I mean, look, you know, Travis Hunter's a really gifted two-way player. You know, I imagine it'll be as a cornerback. And then you have obviously Shedeur, who he's also all over the map. Even when you talk to coaches who coached against him last year, some really like him, some are like, you know, but they also felt like they think he's an NFL quarterback, but they're not seeing maybe top 10 pick. But he was also running for his life last year.
Right.
You know, like, it'd be hard to find a quarterback who's somebody'd say, oh, yeah, that guy is a top 10 draft pick who had as bad an offensive line as he did last year. So this will be an interesting season for him, I think, through the NFL lens. But, I mean, he's obviously really smart. He hangs tough in the pocket. He's accurate, throws a good deep ball. There's a lot of stuff to like about him.
Well, and you know who hopes Deion is right about, or even remotely close to getting the first 2 overall picks in the draft? Being Colorado players, including Shedeur.
Well, I'm sorry.
Every single draft broadcast.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Every last one of them. I'll raise my hand at NFL Network. Everybody at ESPN, ABC, anybody that has anything to do with the NFL draft first round in Green Bay, Wisconsin, if Deion rolls in there with two guys at the top of the draft, and it could go Colorado to start the draft.
You know who else would hope
through
that?
The roof. Through the roof.
You know what else would hope that? Probably everybody who's in the bosses in offices at Fox, everybody who's in offices at the Big 12. Because if they end up anywhere near the top 5 overall picks, both of them, that means Colorado had a terrific year, and that means the ratings aren't just an October thing; they're a 3 or potentially 4.5 month thing.
Which is why Deion says that his wins are viewed differently. It's the truth. It's a fact, and the numbers support it. You and a couple of colleagues, pardon my for not knowing off the top of my head.
Max Olson and Sam Kahn.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Why did you decide to start following the ripple effect of the big, huge stone in the pond of Nick Saban deciding to retire?
Yeah, so Max Olson and I have done a couple of these kinds of stories where it's just like, let's wait and see just how far out the ripple effect or the domino effect of this is. And Max, to his credit, started charting, and it was, over 420 people. All over, like
420 people. What, with Nick Saban retiring, and what happened?
That their jobs changed hands because of it. Many of them had no idea that they one of the, and to Sam's credit, he found this one coach who's at Cisco College in Texas, junior college, that he had no idea that he got the job he got indirectly because Nick Saban retired. Nick Saban retiring set off, the obvious domino effect that people can see is, okay, Kalen DeBoer left Washington to replace him, that Jed Fisch left Arizona to replace Kalen DeBoer. But because Alabama has such a massive staff, one of the people I talked to is Amy Bragg. She's their head nutritionist. She won 5 national titles with Nick Saban. Was there only 2 people in this program were there longer than her on Nick Saban's run. So, it's people like that who, if they don't get retained, and Kalen DeBoer brought his nutritionist, and then it's like, what happens to all these people when they go from there? And the other part of it that was like added layers to this, because you'll get some turnover, but you won't get 400. You had 2 specific, coaches who are now at Alabama as assistants who gave up head coaching jobs in FBS football, one at South Alabama, one at Buffalo, to go work at Alabama. So that creates another, other rounds of jobs.
Yeah, and the article, again, pardon me for not knowing the name of the South Alabama coach.
Shane Womack.
And you told the story of where he was when he found out.
Getting ready to grill steaks, and then he's like, I just hope it doesn't affect my program.
Meaning Saban retiring, affecting his program how? Like that they'd poach someone from his staff or something?
Yeah,
or
something, or somewhere along the way, he ends up losing, some players because somebody ends up getting recruited someplace else.
And instead, his old buddy, Kalen DeBoer, they were coordinators together at Indiana, one of their best seasons ever. The 2 of them, one was offense, one was Kane was the defensive coordinator. Kalen calls him and was like, I want to pick your brain about, because Kalen's not from the Deep South. He's from the Midwest. But Kane he grew up, his dad was a really good defensive coordinator in football, college football. And he was like, I want to pick your brain about this job. And then he was like, by the way, would you be interested in joining the staff as a defensive coordinator? And, this is a real thing. So when I talked to Kane, he's only been a head coach for 3 years. He's the only coach who's ever had winning seasons at the University of South Alabama. And he had a 10-win season a couple of years ago. He's a really good young coach. But he was like, it's a lot harder, and he's not the only one who's told me this, it's a lot harder to be a group of 5 head coach now than it was just a couple of years ago because of NIL and because of the portal. And what that's done is a lot of their really good players get poached. And I just found that fascinating. He's at a barbecue grilling steaks. He sees on his phone an alert that Nick Saban's retired. He's like, "Oh, I hope it doesn't affect my situation."
He doesn't even it's one of his assistants goes, "Hey, Nick Saban's retired." He doesn't even see it.
He doesn't even see it, and his first thought is like, "I hope it doesn't adversely affect my situation." And he's the one that gets poached.
Yeah,
unbelievable. And then you found like a high school coach, like it rippled down all the way to high school. Somebody got a gig because so many pieces moved. That
there's a town in North Florida, Fernandina Beach, and their high school, a lot of it got overturned, the coaching situation, all because somebody went to, it was like the South Alabama head coach who became Major Applewhite, who got promoted up into the job.
Yeah.
You know, he hired Paul Petrino, who, you know, like there's like all these layers fell into place. And then all of a sudden that opened up jobs. And the guys who end up having this are like, wait, I got this job because of Nick Saban retiring. And because like some of us have told those guys, oh yeah, you're a part of this. And it just kind of blows their mind about how widespread this is. So fast forward a couple of weeks ago, or rewind a couple of weeks ago, I'm in Seattle working on this story. And I sit down with Steve Belichick. And I said, what would you have thought if I had told you like a month before, you know, in December, that you'd be a college coach? He was like, I'd rolled my eyes, you know, like kind of and he just, but because Jed Fisch got the job at Washington, Jed was looking at hiring. He saw your alma mater, you know, how well it had worked when Jim Harbaugh hired Mike McDonald, who'd been an NFL assistant. He saw Danton Lynn, NFL assistant, these guys become coordinators. He's like, I think that's it could be the way to go. And then hear Steve Belichick, because as Jed Fisch told me, he was like, wow, a crazy week is what he thought when Saban retires was the day after Pete Carroll's out at Seattle, and Jed, having worked in New England, kind of had a hunch that Bill Belichick was going to be out the next day. Jed had no idea that the Washington job would be open. He thought they were going to promote Ryan Grubb, who had been the offense coordinator, and Ryan Grubb ends up becoming the Seattle Seahawks offense coordinator
for Mike McDonald.
And now this is like not for the story, but like both the two guys who are probably most similar in coaching, and Jed's path is so different from everybody else, is Mike McDonald. Neither guy, like both guys are really smart. Neither guy played college football. They worked their way up and, you know, found paths through Harbaugh's, and, you know, and Jed had a bunch of other stops, but now they're in the same city.
Same city. It's unbelievable. Bruce Feldman here. Everybody should check out that article. And, you know, just to bring this kind of full circle here, starting by saying I feel like we are at the watershed moment of a totally different new world in college football. And over in the spring, you know, Greg Sankey, who I think is going to wind up running the whole damn thing, personally.
He kind of already does.
I know he kind of already does, but I think at some point they're going to do this, okay? And they, meaning somebody's going to get together and look at him and say,
you got to be the commissioner,
yes,
or we need a commissioner.
Correct, of a new entity that is 60-something schools strong,
okay,
and split it up into a couple conferences, and all of these schools have the same issues and sensibilities. The issues and sensibilities surrounding NIL, transfer portal, scheduling, all of that stuff, because and the latest sort of bellwether for this was Sankey at the SEC media days, telling a story of how he got to call Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, to say, let's start our own working group together. And it was, I guess he's telling the story in January, prior to the national championship in Arizona, that they were going to, or prior to something that was going down, and prior to the national championship in Texas, obviously. But long story short, he said he was at a working group conversation on NIL, and they got a report, and they threw it open for questions to the group, and he backed, I'm paraphrasing here, he backed up to let's see what other people are going to ask questions about, and nobody asked a damn question. And he's just like, really? Nothing? Like, that's what's happening here? And he just said, I got to, basically, I'm paraphrasing, I got to call somebody. And he called Petitti, because who's as close to the SEC with the same issues on NIL and everything else, and sensibilities? It's the Big Ten. We're so close. We're getting there. We're inching our way towards there. And tell me I'm wrong.
I don't know that you are. I think there's a lot of entanglements right now with TV contracts that I think those things need to be sorted out.
So, right? So is it, who's the one that's going to say we need somebody? Because it's not going to be school presidents. Is it ESPN? Right, where ESPN is just going to basically say,
ESPN's not going to do anything that's not primarily suited to ESPN's interest, though.
Well, which would be
like, it's running pretty well right now for ESPN because they have they gave a little of the playoff up, but they didn't want Fox to have any of it, right? Full disclosure, obviously, I work at Fox.
Right.
But, like, they don't have the Big Ten. They do, they're all in on now the SEC. We're going to see how the playoff works for the next couple of years. Like, right now, the Big 12, like, the Big 12 could have a 9-3 champ, or I guess it'd be 10-3.
Right.
And they could be slotted. They would be slotted ahead of, the second best SEC school, and get a first round bye. One of the 4 seeds, or it's going to be interesting to see how much fallout there is, depending on how the playoff starts to shake out. And I think because that's the big ticket item that everybody who is in the sport looks at. If you're Tony Petitti at the Big Ten, or certainly if you're Greg Sankey, because they're the ones who have the most influence. I mean, like, we had Brett Yormark is one of the smartest people, I feel like, who's come into college sports. He's
Big 12
Big 12 commissioner, came from, had been in the NBA, just a really sharp guy. And I feel like, I don't know if I would necessarily categorize it as he saved the Big 12, but he's been a godsend for the Big 12.
So that's what I'm saying, is that there's schools in the Big 12, schools in the Big 10, schools in the SEC, schools in the ACC, which you say is already beginning to be shaky. You've got Notre Dame as well.
Yeah.
Find some other schools that might be able to be poached.
I think those
and
are
throw it in their 64, and then there's other teams that may not make the 64 that can be relegated in or out, just like the Premier League.
What I'm getting at is it needs to be something where Greg Sankey especially, and Tony Petitti, but especially Greg Sankey, needs to have the motivation to go, this system is not good enough for our interests.
The current system.
Well,
it isn't. It's going to, at some point, it won't be, because there's too much wild west when it comes to portal, when it comes to NIL, and plus it's also maybe not good for the kids. I think it's the transfer portal is good for the kids. But when
the NIL is certainly good for the kids.
Unless the kid is being told, come here and you're going to make X, and there's no real way to back that play up, and then the kid's left with no NIL money that he was promised. And no roster spot that he was promised. And then all of a sudden he's just sitting, what the hell just happened? Because some other kid comes in from a portal. Like, there has to be some sort of
right now
codification for these kids.
Right now it's the wild west. I mean, you work specifically in a fully flown business that, with the NFL, I forgot, there's one owner I heard who was like, roots for the Dallas Cowboys because he knows that's good for their business. Even if his team, I don't know if that's his second favorite team or whatnot. I don't know if that's a joke, like he's joking or being half serious.
Sure.
But I think that's where things are headed. I don't know how fast they get there because there's so many balls up in the air, whether it's lawsuits. There's some stuff that's going to get sorted out.
The paying of players too?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but you
by
also,
schools?
Like we had this conversation, I was going to say, with Yormark, where it was about, whether it becomes like the All-State 12 as opposed to the Big 12, like with naming rights. You're also talking about private equity. I don't know. The private equity thing he seemed to indicate will be moving faster if it's going to happen than it's a timeline.
Well, certainly if schools are going to have to pay players, okay.
Where's the money coming from?
Private equity, probably. I've heard some people telling me that there are definitely some schools that would say, we are not equipped for this. We're not equipped for this. So you private equity, you run our school program and pay us a licensing fee to use our school name. We're out. We're out of running athletics personally. You run it, you fund it, you pay us a fee for using our school name and marks and logos.
I do feel
that's the way this is going.
I do feel like there are now, and again, I say this with Yormark in mind, I feel like there are smarter business people running the conferences than there were a generation ago.
Oh, I'd agree with that.
So, but I think they're also way more open to being outside the box. I mean, in his case, he comes completely from outside of college sports. Tony Petitti is a guy who is a TV guy at the core.
He gave me one of my first post ESPN jobs.
There you have
at CBS. He put a blazer on me. a CBS Sports blazer for the U.S. Open. So that actually happened.
Really?
Yeah, I got that call about a month after I left ESPN. I was in Italy on a honeymoon with my wife. That's who I'm on honeymoon with. It's so stupid for me to say that, but yeah, I got that call from him. I've known him for a long time, and I respect the hell out of him, despite what happened with my coach last year. I do. It's actually in my closet in the green room. I still have it. Before I let you go, Bruce Feldman, I'm going to throw this one out. This will be some fun, sports talk radio fun. We just mentioned NIL World. I think we're in year 3 of that now. It was July 1st. Was it 2021 we were on the air when that actually happened, when the first states in our football loving union?
So it's 2024, so it's 21.
21, so it's 3 years now. We're in our 4th year of NIL World. Transfer portal, all of this stuff, collectives, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Name me the 5 schools that are best equipped to succeed in this new world.
Right now.
Right now, for the next few years, give me the 5 schools that are best equipped in this world with collectives and NIL and transfer portal and administrations all together. What do you got?
2 of the ones are... Oregon was the one that jumped into my head. They're going full blast. You got Phil Knight, and they have a professionalized operation. I think Dan Lanning's does a really good job with it. I think Ohio State has gotten to that point. I don't think they were. I mean, you had kind of two dealing collectives or warring collectives, or inside that. I don't think that was an optimum situation, but they seem to be equipped and functioning well. Ole Miss, Walker Jones is their guy who runs the show. He is a former Ole Miss player who had worked with Jimmy Sexton at CAA and then worked at Under Armour. He knows what he's doing. He knows the landscape. And they've been really, really strong coming out this off season, right? I don't know if I would put them, on the NIL side, yes. On some of the other things that go with it, I don't think they have the advantages that Texas has. I don't think they have the advantages. So
Texas is one of the schools then?
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's not just the NIL thing. It's all the other things you can leverage, right? Mm-hmm. Like Georgia, I don't know how you can't put Georgia in, except it's not like Georgia, I don't know. I would say this. So Georgia, the biggest commodity in the free agent market this offseason in college football is Caleb Downs, a terrific freshman defensive back at Alabama. Most people assumed he was going to go to Georgia. I think even Georgia thought he would. He ended up at Ohio State. So I don't know if I'm going to put that much weight into, okay, Ohio State's there and maybe not Georgia. But I mean, Georgia right now is like the king of college football, even if they didn't win the national title the last year.
All right, so I'm writing this down. So are we including Georgia in this?
I need not 5. Include Georgia.
Okay, so you got Georgia. You mentioned Oregon.
Ohio State.
Ole Miss. You mentioned Ole Miss.
I'm mentioning Ole Miss because the NIL operation I think they have is running strong. So you think
Ole Miss is one of the top 5 best equipped football programs to negotiate the next 5 years? Over Texas?
No. I'm probably putting too much stock in just the NIL component.
So you're putting Texas in this?
I would put Texas in there given where they are right now. And
how about that we haven't mentioned Alabama?
I would put Alabama.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, I mean, he's recruiting really well.
Kalen DeBoer?
He is. Okay. Now, we'll see how, the season goes and everything like that. If you go 8-4, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll struggle like that. But if they do, then but to me, those are the ones between the combination of NIL and the combination of where they are at from a resource standpoint, where they're at from a leadership standpoint, and stability. And I think stability does matter. That's why I put those 5.
Okay, so over the next 5, it's 3 SEC teams because we're including Texas now.
Yeah, they are.
And 2 Big Ten teams because we're including Oregon. You would say I need to get ready over the next 5 years for Oregon to supplant Michigan in the annual battle with Ohio State? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a huge difference, but I think right now they have a more aggressive NIL operation. I'll say that.
So we need our Phil Knight. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Maybe that needs to be you. Schefter.
Why not?
Guys?
It doesn't. Schefter and I together probably don't have maybe 10 pairs of Nikes together. You know what I mean? I shouldn't assume what Schefter's shoe closet looks like.
Stephen Ross?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Jeffrey Ross? I don't know. Use your connections. Whoever.
Tom Brady?
So, because again, this is the way of the world. This is it. Obviously, there's 12 teams that can make a college football playoffs as of right now.
Right.
But these are the 5 teams based on the current new way of doing things and how the next 5 years will look. The 5 schools currently best equipped to be successful as consistently as we're used to seeing them: Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Alabama. That's
Yes, I would say.
All right, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for
Good
having
to see
me.
you. And I'll say this again. You and I were texting each other. Excited to have you on Wednesdays during the fall.
Yeah, me too. I
Back
love
again.
it. And I get to see, a lot of people tell me they see it, so that's really cool.
Isn't that great? Thank you very much.
See you on Rich Eisen.
I appreciate hearing that. That's Bruce Feldman here of Fox Sports and The Athletic. Check out this fascinating Kevin Bacon-like piece trying to follow along the ripple effect of Nick Saban's retirement. Best dad ever, Bruce Feldman. His daughter's been watching this entire conversation. Hi,
Big
Riley.
sports fan over there.
There you go.
Big sports fan.
Riley Feldman's been sitting here saying, when are we leaving, Daddy? Now, Riley, now. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.